Welcome, everybody. It is Lack of Lepers, also known as SCP-CRNP. We tried to do this last night where I catch up on the SCP articles. I made the mistake of having too short of a glass, and then I also made the mistake of actually trying to read them, word for word, which is no bueno. That's a no-no. You will die before that happens. So thank you for joining. This is really just an impromptu stream, not advertising this at all. And the reason is because I want to try to trial this, see how it does. I think we have everything we need to get started. So let's just jump right into it. Let me share the screen. And this is a little bit of a because once again, the point of me doing this is to prepare for our Saturday show, our Saturday stream called SCP Meta, which you are on the channel of at this moment, and also released as a podcast called Config Call In. And so the point of this is to prepare for that, but it's more than that. It's also to keep abridged of the developments in SCP, which is hard to do for anybody, but particularly those who like the SCP. It's almost like the more you're into the SCP, the harder it is to actually keep up with all the articles, because you want to read every single one as opposed to just the occasional one, and there's just too many coming out. It's almost like trying to take a sip out of a fire hydrant. And so we're going to try to find a way to do that today together. So let's walk through that, and hopefully I can help you out getting through this. Very tall task. Very, very tall task. So, on the screen, what do I have here? So, it is April 10th, and we're going to go through the past week. Today's Sunday. So, we're actually going to stop at the 8th. This is catch up. I've already done this week's episode, obviously. We're going to avoid April 1st, thank God. And we'll just dip into these. These are just the SCPs. I'm not interested in tales. Obviously, that's ridiculous, redonkulous. And so we'll just do the SCPs. Let's get right into it. So this is the first one. This is 4518. The containment class is Euclid. It is level 1, so it is unrestricted. And the disruption class is dark. So let's start to listen to this. We're going to have our buddy Brian read it for us. So let's go.
Special Containment Procedures. The physical containment of SCP-4518 is unnecessary due to its highly inert and undisruptive nature. Okay. Site-228 is responsible for further research.
Okay. Well, that's pretty simple. It's unnecessary. So it's interesting that the containment is unnecessary due to its inert and undisruptive nature, but it's also Euclid, so that's already a kind of appealing thing. Let's continue.
Description: SCP-4518 is a fully inflated and worn blue rubber balloon possessing a birthday cake pattern on it. Tied to the balloon's string is a cardboard note, seemingly impervious to moisture and weathering. See addendum. The object traverses the troposphere at slow speeds and varying altitudes below 10 kilometers. SCP-4518 has been seen avoiding extreme weather conditions, only ever being present in areas with calm winds and sometimes vast expanses of clouds. How SCP-4518 gained its anomalous properties is unknown, but its detection occurred on the 13th of March, 2022, after remnants of a thaumaturgical activation were detected by Site-228 on the premises of the Walls residence following the funeral of Tina Walls. A search of the home revealed no items of interest pertaining to SCP-4518 or its origins. The property is now in possession of Jacob Walls I after inheriting it from his mother, Tina Walls. The house, however, is currently unoccupied.
And that footnote reads, currently under Foundation surveillance. That's the property. Okay. I like this quite a lot so far. It's very simple, and you can kind of see where it's going. So let's just go ahead and wrap it up as we know it will be.
Addendum, the attached note has been transcribed below. I'm sorry. I couldn't be there for you when it really mattered. If I knew, I never would have left. You gave me everything you had. All your love, care, and warmth, and I'm so happy I received it from you. This balloon is the same one you sent me on my last special day. I've held on to it, even once it deflated. And now, I'm using it to send you this message. I hope you'll find this, wherever you are, up there. Thank you, and I love you, Mom.
Aw, heartwarming. These kind of SCPs I like. I mean, it obviously is so different from the initial kind of vibe of the wiki. All right, so now that we've read this, let's see who wrote it. It's written by author Jack Waltz, and it's called "Stern Slowly Cross the Sky, I Say Goodbye." And it's sitting at plus 14, which I think is a little too low for this. That's my daughter. It's a little too low. But let's take a peek at what people are saying about it. Am I logged in? I'm not. Yeah. People like it, I think. Uh-oh. Oh, actually, they don't like it very much. They say the short SCPs don't work. Are you kidding me? What? I mean, that was a... You're gonna knock that because it's short? So there's a rewrite. Is that right? I'm not sure. This works well enough for me. I'm truly sorry, but I've read these kinds of baby shoes never worn SCPs too many times to be moved emotionally. The subtleties have to be upped immensely for the article to really have an effect. And an attached note is just too on the nose and cliche. I mean, this is a great comment. It's so true. I mean, I would kind of say that if you're in the mood for like a certain meal, you can just do a good job of cooking that meal, right? It doesn't have to be like super different. If you're in the mood for like a taco, a breakfast burrito, it doesn't have to be like a different breakfast burrito that you've never had before in order for it to be good. So, this commenter is where they are. I really like that comment. I think it's pretty funny. And I agree. I think the baby shoes never worn thing on the SCPs, I think this was just special because it's about motherhood. So whatever, just depends on where you are in your life. That's fine. Yeah, I think the note at the end lays itself out and everything out a little too conveniently and cleanly. I actually agree with that too. I think that's good. This type of short SCP template has been too overdone, and it hasn't brought anything that makes it different from the others. That's funny because we could go back and talk about how the staff tried to incentivize short tales. They still do it. You can see right here. And of course, the wiki realized that was a new area to mine upvotes into very quickly. It's sort of like an if you build it, they will come kind of thing. And so they ran that into the ground pretty quickly and ruined whatever refreshing qualities that a short sort of a turn towards shorter articles could have had. I have a blog post about this that I'm trying to find that I wrote about. Just want to shill for a second, in case you want to look at that. I really should have an easier way to find this. So there's actually two blog posts about this, and the first one here, I'll put on the screen. SCP staff did something great. New addition to the wiki sidebar is a glimmer of hope that has otherwise lost the plot. And then this goes on to talk about how I thought this was a really, really good idea by the staff. And then I think about 2 weeks later, we are now at this point, and this is another article from the blog, and with ease, modern SCP authors swiftly annihilate staff's feeble attempt at a good thing. So that picture kind of says basically what happened. So check those out if you want. That's the Lack of Lepers blog. That's my other name that I go by these days. not really SCP-CRNP, although that's probably what you know me as. All right. Anyway, so go check out those comments if you want. I think that was a decent article. I think it probably is a little better than what its rating would tell you. Okay, so this is our next one. This is going to be SCP-6216. So let me 62 and pop that up there. Okay, so this is level 3 confidential. I'm thankful that it does not tell me who the author is right away. Thank you. The containment class is Euclid. And disruption class and risk class, I don't care about. That's totally complicated, totally unnecessary, totally superfluous, and confusing and obfuscating. It doesn't make anything better. So this first picture is interesting. I kind of thought maybe it's a star field, but no, it's just the deep ocean with all that floating particulate matter. And isn't that funny how those two things overlap? But SCP-6216 instance observed courting a male cat shark while crudely imitating a female counterpart. So this is the actual SCP. This is just a normal fish. So let us take a look at just the containment procedures, and Brian will read it for us.
Special containment procedures. Total containment of SCP-6216 has been deemed unfeasible and unnecessary. Tracking devices are to be implanted in all identified instances. Disinformation protocols are to be enacted in the unlikely event of civilian documentation or recovery of SCP-6216 instances. SCP-6216-03 is currently under observation at ASS-172. All expeditions conducted into SCP-6216-03 are to have written approval from Site Director Douglas. Specialized light fixtures have been attached to the Esposito module at ASS-72 to better facilitate SCP-6216-03 docking events as per Protocol 6216-A03.
All right, so that's interesting, and it looks as though they've made some accommodations to this thing, whatever it is, if they have a protocol for it docking at their deep site. What is this? Deep sea site. So that's interesting. Seems relatively well contained on its own, just by nature. Let's continue to the description. Here we go. Some interesting words in here.
Description: SCP-6216 is a previously undocumented species of tartaropelagic fauna capable of polymorphism via anomalous means, which is largely used to engage in aggressive mimicry. Since the completion of ASS-72, a total of 6 individual instances of SCP-6216 have been identified, all of which initially appeared to be various tartaropelagic fish before ASS-72 personnel noted their unusual appearance and feeding behaviors. Currently, personnel have identified SCP-6216 instances imitating 132 distinct tartaropelagic species. However, there is believed to be no upper limit on this number. The vast majority of SCP-6216 sightings occurred during RO expeditions, and are subject to standard RO tag and release protocol.
Okay, so we basically have some fauna, which is an animal in a very, very deep portion of the ocean that is capable of changing shape, and it does so aggressively. Only 6 have been identified. They all kind of mimic fish in this way, and they have unusual feeding behaviors. Very, very interesting. So we have 6 individual instances that imitate 132 distinct species. So that's interesting as well. They are cited during ROV expeditions. And so now we have an access log. And this doesn't look that long. We have a couple of actors here, and what I'll do in the future is program this AI speaking voice to change when we have different voices. I think that'd be a nice little touch, something I didn't plan for enough for this stream. So let's go ahead and read this.
Begin log. Row footage is centered on a large pale amphipod scuttling along the ocean floor. Blom, beautiful specimen. There's definitely variation from its Hadal counterparts. Rakesh, should we retrieve it for further analysis? Blom, not yet, I'd like to observe. Another amphipod scuttles into view, however its body is a deep shade of red. Blom, would you look at that? Good things do come to those who wait. Rakesh, I'm not too keen on that discoloration, it might be diseased. Blom, all the more reason we should be monitoring it. The two amphipods begin circling each other, before the red instance moves toward its pale counterpart. It grasps the latter using its gnathopods 3 and brings it close to itself. Rakesh, what are we looking at here? Cannibalism? Some sort of zombie scenario? Blom, nonsense. It's standard amphipod mating behavior. The red one's male, you can see it mounting the female. It uses its gnathopods to secure the female for mating as opposed to their normal function of eating. The red amphipod crushes its almost mate with great force, before tearing into the gaps in her exoskeleton. White bodily fluids stain the surrounding water. Blom, oh. Rakesh, great. Now we have zombie shrimp down here. Blom, they are amphipods, Rakesh. Or at least, one of them was. The red amphipod continues to gorge itself on the remains of the other. Additional arms uncharacteristic of amphipods unfurl from its underside to accelerate food intake. Blom, right, I think we'll call it a day here. Tag the red one then bring us back to base. End log.
Look at that. Afterward, the abnormally colored amphipod was later recorded, metamorphosing into a tartarobenthic decapod and received SCP classifications shortly after. Interesting. Okay. That was an ROV log, just a typical example of seeing one of these things and then categorizing it as an SCP later. We saw the very odd behavior and eating going on there. So we've got another addendum. Let's take a look at that.
Addendum 6216.01, SCP-6216 Behavior. The metamorphosis of SCP-6216 is poorly understood, however it is inferred from human measurements that the process involves a certain degree of ontokinetics. The process is energetically demanding, and as such, instances are observed to only undergo metamorphosis every few days. It is believed that SCP-6216 instances rely on a combination of echolocation, electroreception, and chemoreception to identify prey and facilitate feasible metamorphoses into suitable forms. SCP-6216 instances typically metamorphose into female instances of other tartaropelagic fauna in order to increase the probability of encountering male counterparts, but have also been observed to imitate male instances on occasion. Upon such encounters, SCP-6216 instances will imitate mating patterns of the mimicked species, which may last anywhere from 30 seconds to several days, before incapacitating and consuming its prey. Researchers have proposed that this unusual interaction may be orchestrated to obtain genetic material from prey species to improve its mimicry. Additionally, SCP-6216 instances have been observed to engage in mating behaviors while metamorphosed as the same or similar species. Notably, these interactions do not conclude with the consumption of any involved party. However, the viability of these encounters for reproductive purposes remains a subject of study by DSS-72 personnel.
All right, so we've got basically body snatchers, body thieves that will fuck, and or eat. Maybe, at the same time. Fuck, that's fucked up. All right, so yeah, this is interesting. I think it maybe could have gone in the description, but at the same time, I like this. I like the actual description first, and it kind of gives a little chronology to it, like they understood its behavior a little later. Okay, so there's one more addendum. This is a physical description, which once again may have been in the actual description. I'm not too sure about the structure here, but let's listen.
No SCP-6216 instance has been found in an unmetamorphosed state thus far, with genetic samples revealing few similarities to known organisms. In spite of SCP-6216's success in predatory mimicry amongst prey populations, visual analysis shows that SCP-6216 instances cannot accurately recreate visual non-bioluminescent appearances. Instances universally retain a distinct dark red coloration, which is used to identify undocumented instances. However, SCP-6216 instances have been noted to take on forms outside that of local fauna, the most notable example being SCP-6216-03.
So the author is doing a really good job with some things. They're slowly reeling out the data to us, which I like, okay? And then they're noting very well where to obscure the information. So we don't actually know what this actually looks like in its natural state, which adds a nice little tinge of creepiness to it. And although I guess it might be dark red, right? And then this is a really nice moment of foreshadowing. So basically it can tell us that it can mimic other things besides fauna. And there's one instance of 3, but we don't know anything else about it yet. So that's nice. So we have another ROV log. And once again, in the future, I will stylize this a bit with the audio and make it to where you have 2 voices talking to one another. So that should be fun. But just for now, since we're kind of testing this out, test run, we will read this. And again, this is a ROV log. It's a movie. It's being transcribed. Let's go. It is processing. Give Brian a second. He'll come in just a minute. How are you? Doing well? Good. Thanks for showing up. We'll do this every week. We'll do this
Forward,
Fridays.
JSS-72 sonars detected a large unidentified structure within 150 meters of the site complex. Following further remote observation, a Row 5 expedition was authorized to investigate the structure.
I want to pause that real quick. Why has an ROV only now been footnoted when it's shown up? No, it shows up 33 times in the article, and if you don't include the collapsible, 6 times previous to this. Maybe not 6 exactly, but maybe 5, maybe 4, maybe 3. Anyway, my point still stands. Not sure why this is being footnoted now. That's kind of odd. Let's go back.
Forward, JSS-72 sonars detected a large unidentified structure within 150 meters of the site complex. Following further remote observation, a Row 5 expedition was authorized to investigate the structure. Audio logs from the row control module have also been included in the following log. Begin log. The sandy sea floor is visible as the row and its lights glide overhead. Nothing else can be seen. Rakesh, 30 meters and approaching. You think this might just be some awkwardly placed whale fall? Anselmo, I'd wager it's just some trash or wreckage tossed down by the currents. Whale falls don't usually survive the Gloria line. 6. A large structure abruptly emerges from the darkness. Its dark red coloration slowly becomes visible as light from the row lamps fall on its surface. The walls can be seen gently pulsating. Rakesh, wonderful, this thing is probably alive. I'd say we can check off enemy site and lost civilization off the list, unless there's some Nalkan sect that lives down here.
God knows what that
Anselmo,
is.
according to the scans there should be an aperture around. Ro moves around the instance, revealing a large sphincteral hole in one of the walls.
Ugh, that's an
It
ass.
expands and contracts rhythmically,
Fucked
but
up.
does not close entirely.
It's got prolapsed
Anselmo,
anus.
here. God, that looks abhorrent. Move her in. Rakesh, at least one of us is confident it won't seal up behind us. Ro enters the hole, revealing an interior composed of fleshy dark red surfaces. Bulbous structures are seen spread out, seemingly at random. Blue bioluminescent markings are present on some of these surfaces, most notably along the ceilings. Rakesh, what the hell is this thing? Anselmo, I'm guessing we just piloted the row into some megafauna's back end. Give me a minute, I'm calling Blom over. Brief period of row inactivity. The inner walls of the structure continue to pulsate, and the bioluminescent streaks gradually migrate across the ceiling. After several minutes, the motion of a large unidentified object just outside the camera's field of view is observed. Rakesh, Elmo, I think we picked something up on the cams. Anselmo, you think it might just be fish? Rakesh, didn't move like one. Blom, alright, what do we have here? Something about a new megafauna, was it? Anselmo, see for yourself. Ro is turned towards a wall. It moves closer towards it, offering a more detailed view of the undulating folds and wrinkles that run across it. Blom, yeah, you're definitely inside something biological, although I wouldn't be so quick to describe it as a back end. Anselmo, perhaps, but I highly doubt that we entered through a mouth. Blom, that's not what I mean, sighs, give us a better look around, Rakesh. Ro moves further into the structure, revealing a long corridor. No endpoint is discernible at this distance. The silhouettes of long objects can be clearly seen swaying in the distance. Blom, this is just a hunch, but I think I might know what you've stumbled into. Anselmo, what? You found another massive flesh complex. Blom, not exactly. You remember the zombie shrimp case, yes? Rakesh was there. These things can mimic other species, close that distance and lower their guard, and then. Anselmo, pseudo-cannibalism? Blom, no, but I think you get the point. Ro floats down the corridor. Illumination of the long silhouettes reveal them to be formations reminiscent of an anthozoan polyp, with a calcified cylindrical body protruding from bulbous lumps on the floor of the corridor. The formations terminate in a thick mass of red tendrils, while two stumps protrude from the sides of the body. From these, more tendrils are visible, albeit woven into thick red bundles. These two terminate in a thick mass of unfurled tendrils. The entire formation bears a certain degree of resemblance to a heavily malformed humanoid. Rakesh, Jesus Christ. Anselmo, gags, please excuse M. Ro ceases movement. Anselmo can be heard vomiting into a bucket on control room audio logs. The tendrils continue to sway despite the absence of significant currents, as recorded by Ro sensors. Blom, fascinating. I've never seen anything like this down here so far. I'll have to ask that you retrieve some samples back for us. See if it's an organ or an independent organism.
It's kind of gross.
Rakesh, alright, but if you ever need more of these, for the love of God ask someone else to man the row.
Sexist.
Anselmo, seconded. Samples are excised from a nearby wall via robotic arm.
Of the ass.
Blom, it perplexes me, though. If this is indeed an SCP-6216 instance, what's it mimicking?
A big asshole.
Rakesh, maybe there's some really large tartarabenthic fauna buried around here somewhere.
Terrifying.
Something we haven't found yet.
That's scarier than the SCP.
Blom, potentially, but this instance didn't bury itself, so logically, it's mimicking something on the ocean floor, rather than under it. We would have noticed something of that scale by now if that were the case.
So sure of yourself.
Rho repositions itself to facilitate collection of samples from the polyp formation.
Gross.
When the Rho's robotic arm touches one of the side tendrils, the head of the polyp turns towards the Rho, which immediately ceases movement.
Gross, man.
8 seconds of silence on control room audio logs.
Pretty creepy.
The tendrils at the head of the polyp begin to oscillate. Audio is recorded from the Rho, presumed to be emitted from the polyp. Audio is composed of humming, clicking, and short intervals of sounds resembling muffled human speech.
Get out of there. Nope.
Blom, did I just hear it say Elmo?
Elmo?
Anselmo, no. You did not. Shut up. Rakesh, get us out of there, right now.
Elmo?
As the Rho retreats, the structure begins to tremor. Rho footage becomes murky due to sediment kicked up from the ocean floor. It eventually escapes into open water, and begins its return to DSS-72. Anselmo, told you it wouldn't close up behind us.
Surprising.
Rakesh, guys, something's following the Rho. Anselmo, following us? What are you? Rho rear camera footage shows a wall of murky water following behind it and coming closer. The Rho is eventually engulfed and tossed around by eddy currents. Blom, shit. Rakesh, we haven't lost control yet. We'll just have to proceed with low visibility. Anselmo, what was that? Blom, no idea.
Could have been the asshole.
Could have been the 6216 instance moving to do some hunting, or
swallowing you up in an asshole.
Breach alert 7 is heard from the control room. Blom, something spooked it. Must have been a big fish if it tripped the proximity alert. Anselmo, Blom, please, shut up. Rakesh, just focus on bringing the Rho back, please. It's not our job to be concerned about whether that was an 6216 instance or something bigger. Rho manages to stabilize, and continues on its return journey through the murky water. Rakesh, sight's just a few meters ahead. Anselmo, alright, bring her down to the moon pool. While GE, wait, is that the southern airlock? Rho footage shows a massive organism, presumably the structure discovered earlier, attaching itself to the main airlock of the DSS-72 South Wing. Blom, oh god. End log.
I think that was probably the best part of the article so far. Yeah, easily. That really reminded me of old school SCPs. There's a SCP written by Dr. Gears and Clef, really old, and it was just really disgusting. It had things to do with like orifices and underwater exploration in a ROV, and people getting trapped in there, and I think seminal fluid. But anyway, yeah, that they got really, really creepy. That was a long interview. I may break those up in the future, just to give a little pause. We can reflect together. But yeah, this really has an old school kind of creepiness to it. I think it's done really well. It's woven really well. So there's one more collapsible here, and this is actually just an incident report, and it's about as long. Ugh, we got some gross images in here. So let's take this incident report, which is actually a log, and let us cut it about in half. So right here, we'll start with this. Way Brian is not overloaded.
Begin log. SCP-6216 instance is seen attached to the airlock, holding itself in place via multiple thick muscular appendages. Slight damage to the surrounding structure can be seen. 008. Site Command is alerted to the exact location of the SCP-6216 instance, and is subsequently designated SCP-6216-03 after confirmation from a concurrent row expedition.
So this is that 3.
Evacuation order is issued to entire South Wing.
Of course it is.
SCP-6216-03 can be seen attempting and failing to pry open the airlock.
There's 2 2s in there.
047.
See that? 2 2.
Research personnel arrive at the consensus that SCP-6216-03 had mistaken SS-72 to be an instance of Tartarobenthic fauna, and is now attempting to prey on it. 109. Site Command deliberates the feasibility of deploying on-site torpedoes, but decides against it due to the proximity of the South Wing primary airlock to infrastructure deemed critical. 147. South Wing is fully vacated. Site Command issues controlled breach order to prevent irreparable damage to the South Wing primary airlock. Sedative turrets are primed at modules adjacent to airlock module. Force applied to airlock begins to exceed structural limits, prompting the activation of several alarms. SCP-6216-03 is heard groaning at a low frequency.
Groaning?
152. The outer door of the South Wing primary airlock is opened. SCP-6216-03 ceases all violent activity. 154. Sedative turrets placed on standby under instructions to activate on command. SCP-6216-03 cautiously inserts a smaller appendage into the airlock. Appendage is tipped with long thin tendrils resembling bristles, inferred to be sensory in nature.
No.
203. SCP-6216-03 replaces its sensory appendage with a longer, thicker instance terminating in 3 sharp prongs.
What the?
It probes the airlock floor, stopping short of the inner door. 205. SCP-6216-03 vocalizes loudly at a low frequency. Vocalization is heard throughout the site. Personnel have reported accompanying feelings of discomfort and/or fear. 211. SCP-6216-03 ceases all visible activity.
Okay, so the vibe of this is changing. I don't think it's trying to eat it at this point. And I'm worried that it's trying to do something else. And I hope I'm wrong, but I think it just gave it... I think it just gave it cunnelings. and then went for the home run, I think, is what just happened. If not, then there's some serious multi-layer parallels going on here that the author might be having fun with. But it comes through a little strong. That's not a pun either. But and then I think that this line right here, personnel have reported. Okay, this is like an emergency that is happening, in the moment, and it's first of all a very strange tonal shift to get so granular as to reporting about what personnel have reported, and furthermore, that's just feelings of discomfort and or fear, which of course you have a giant SCP attacking your underwater facility. I don't think this sentence needs to be in there at all. It's not good. It cheapens the thing a little bit. Okay, we're about halfway through this incident. Almost done. So let's just finish it. Brian.
Site Command debates the feasibility of a preemptive strike using the sedative turrets. 238. A long bulge is seen traveling along the appendage in the airlock. As it reaches its end, a veiny bulbous mass is discharged into the prongs, which places it down in the corner of the airlock. Personnel observing the footage from the airlock express a combination of disgust, awe, and/or fascination, notably divided along occupational lines.
That's good. That's really good.
251. SCP-6216-03 continues to discharge aforementioned masses into the airlock. Vocalization also continues. Research personnel debate the purpose of the masses, eventually inferring them to be embryonic sacs as opposed.
Yeah, so we're already there. So embryonic sac. So basically, this thing is inseminating something. Once again, I think it's a little strange to get so microcosmic as to get attention to and report the expressions of the personnel. I mean, I don't really think that you would care to note that. This is a great line. Notably divided along occupational lines. That's so true. So true. Okay. And then this is weird. So during the happening, in just a matter of less than 20 minutes, the research personnel are debating while this thing is doing its thing. The purpose of the mess is eventually inferring them to be embryonic sacs, as opposed to waste. And so how in the world would they know that just from looking at it? It's just very strange. There's a lot of jumps and some logic going on here. I don't know about that. Very odd.
1652. SCP-6216-03 retreats from the airlock entirely, having deposited a total of 21 embryonic sacs into the airlock. Site command sedative turrets are deactivated. South wing evacuation order partially lifted, with armed personnel making preparations to retrieve the sacs in the airlock. 1655.
Sacs. Get it?
Site
Sacs.
command attempts and fails to fully close the outer airlock door. An underwater drone is prepared to assist in closing the airlock door and carrying out repairs. 1704. Proximity breach alerts sound. SCP-6216-03 is seen returning to the south wing
Coming
airlock.
back for seconds, baby.
Embryonic sac retrieval efforts put on hold. Sedative turrets reactivated and primed.
Okay, so it's coming back. You got a second wind. I really like this deep
SCP-6000.
This deep sea site. Oh, baby.
1711. SCP-6216-03 inserts a single appendage into the airlock. It is smaller than the pronged appendage, and lacks any discernible features. 1714. Appendage discharges a white stream of liquid into the water in the airlock. It coalesces into an opaque cloud, eliminating visibility in the airlock cameras.
Eliminating
research personnel identify the liquid to be seminal fluid.
Yep.
Personnel present to hear this declaration universally expressed disgust.
That's pretty funny.
1719. SCP-6216-03 is seen leaving the airlock via external cameras. Row is deployed, and successfully closes the airlock.
So this is absolutely disgusting. Yeah, thanks. What a turn this has taken. I'm still a little confused as to what this big 3 instance looks like. I think I'm supposed to be confused by it. In my mind, it's just this disembodied embryo carrying appendage of musculature and flesh, and basically a dick. So this is really gross. We're almost done here, so let's just knock it out. This has been kind of a long one.
21 fertilized SCP-6216 eggs are currently under observation in a pressurized incubator.
Gross.
None have hatched thus far.
Good.
Additionally, unfertilized SCP-6216 eggs have been found to be dense in nutrients, and as such have been approved for consumption by DSS-72 personnel following sanitization protocols. Its integration into the DSS-72 food supply has since saved the site considerable funds and resources, as well as eased the difficulty of transporting supplies to such depths.
Okay, so on the surface of it, I thought they were eating, but now that I'm looking at it a little closer, it looks as though this is basically like unfertilized eggs. I mean, so like chicken eggs or unfertilized eggs. Caviar is the same thing. So it's really maybe not as gross, although I don't know if I would eat the eggs, unfertilized or not, of a huge SCP that we don't know anything about. I guess these people are on some hard financial times. I guess the economy sucks as bad there as it does here, and decided to eat what they can. So finish.
Despite also being identified to be nutritionally dense, JSS-72 administration has expressed that it will not be considering
Oh,
the integration of the seminal fluid of
oh, come on, dude.
SCP-6216 into its food
Of
supply.
course they didn't. What the fuck? This has gotten really, really weird. Hey, Fapples Apples, thanks for joining us. Um, Fapples Apples says, I'd eat it. LOL weenie. Yeah, what would you eat? What part exactly? Would you eat the actual weenie, or would you eat these guys, or would you eat the eggs? I'd probably eat the eggs. Certainly wouldn't eat the seminal fluid. I mean, what the hell, man? What the hell? This has taken a very, very weird turn. Everything. Yeah. Well, some people have to do that, you know. Sometimes these things happen. I guess they're very desperate down there. I'm sure the menu isn't very varied, in deep sea sites. So, all right. Yeah, let's just finish this out because there's 2 paragraphs left, but it's getting really weird really quick, and I just want to get this over with.
SCP-6216-03 has since returned to the JSS-72 South Wing airlock to repeat its above actions, which have been designated as SCP-6216-03 docking events. Site Command has permitted the opening of the South Wing airlock during such docking events to prevent unnecessary structural damage, in addition to the mandatory closure of the airlock immediately following the completion of overposition by and withdrawal of SCP-6216-03. This was due to concerns over difficulties in cleaning the airlock and blockage in the drains, as SCP-6216-03's seminal fluid coagulates in the presence of air.
This is a really weird way to end it, and I was afraid that it would get weirder, and it actually is. I don't know if people have caught on to this. I guess they don't care, but because it's at plus 33. So basically, this big old SCP-3 instance rapes this deep sea site. That's essentially what's happening, and it is a hermaphroditic thing. I don't know if that's actually mentioned in here, or it's not. So that's interesting to know. And yeah, so basically they've decided to just roll over and let it rape them as opposed to risk structural damage. And I guess if you're eating or considering eating seminal fluid, I guess maybe you are out of options. So I guess you just roll over. This is a really, really weird SCP. I got to say, it started off really, really cool. But it kind of took a weird turn. Yeah, this comment says it all. So that's just a very strange place to take all this into. I don't know how I feel about all that. I was really rooting for this for a second, but now I'm not so sure. Very odd. Fapples Apples asks, what's your opinion on SCP-835? Let us see. I'm not sure if I've read this. Okay, so this is off to a good start. We have an adult content. Oh, actually, I know this one very well. Yeah, this is something. Okay, wow. So you know SCPs pretty well, Fapple Apples. Let me ask, who the hell are you? Where did you come from? Because yeah, this is a real old article. I think it is by Dr. Gears and Clef, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Dr. Gears and Clef. This is from 2009. And this is really what I was mentioning while we were reading this earlier, and that this new skip, the 6216, reminds me of this one. Thank you for providing the actual number. I wasn't sure of it. But this is a really disgusting article. This is a very disgusting article. I think it's a pretty good job of just body horror and also like just gross factor. This turned up to 11. But the real interesting thing about this, the one that I think sets it apart more so than just it being gross, because quite honestly, this is disgusting, and it doesn't really quite reach that next level of standing apart, in my opinion. I think the rating is fair given the quality of it. So, but what this does is you'll see down here, the expungements. You can click here and you can see the exact same article without the expungements, and it's actually, I think, worse reading it unredacted. So that's a testament to the good writing of Dr. Clef and of Dr. Gears. When you have someone like Dr. Clef and Dr. Gears decide they're going to try to creep people and gross people out as much as they can, I think that you're not going to miss. So very cool. Thank you for bringing that up. This says uncensored. There's another one too. That's a little pun, I guess. All right. Well, let's, before we go, because this has been kind of like I said, a trial run. I think I've found a good amount of data and feedback to make this show a little better. I don't think we'll be able to get through all of these in a weekly fashion. There's still too many of them. I mean, we're 2 in, and it's been an hour. So that's unreasonable. So I'll probably have to just select a few. And gosh, I hate that. The whole point of this is supposed to be we can catch up. Of course, this is something to do with the Fish Council, which is just adds another layer of disgusting to this. So a random day, who I am no fan of politically, but who I respect as an author and as a critic, has been doing a lot of good crits lately, and so I'll read this. The dialogue and characters in the ROV logs are the article's weakest point. They're bland padding that detract from the creepiness of the undersea environment and the sheer coolness of a predatory fish that uses anomalous mimicry. I'm also not a fan of the semi-comedic ending, which feels tonally dissonant from the previous logs and isn't a satisfying payoff for the escalating horror of the anomalous mimicry. I think that's very, very well said. I actually enjoyed the ROV log. I thought the dialogue was pretty good. I think it was probably above average for what you read in the SCP. Maybe not as good as a random day, but I thought it was pretty good. And I also thought, just looking back at the article, I thought it was funny how the first incident with the fish, with the zombie fish, they thought it was going to mate with it and it decided to eat it. And then that's mirrored and inverted by the end, where they think it's trying to eat the site, this big old SCP-3 instance, but it's actually trying to mate with it. So that's a funny little flip. But yeah, I think we'll tell that to some people. They'll try. If it's got nipples, you can milk it. But yeah, a random day, I think, says some good stuff here. I think it is ruined by the seminal comedic ending, and it absolutely feels tonally dissonant. That's really something that we see a lot of on the SCP Wiki these days. We see articles that are huge contrivances in order to land a one-line punchline that shows up at the end, and that's just a style that we're in right now. I appreciate this one for not going all out and essentially being a J article that's posted to the main list, which is also something that's pretty common these days. But yeah, I mean, I think, gosh, is it a good article? Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed reading it. I thought that there were some real nice lines in there. So interesting to hear your thoughts as well. So this will be just the pilot episode. I'm going to have to find a way to get through more content in less time. That's so difficult to do, but it's really the whole point of this. So we got to find a way to do that. But I generally like the setup. I think Brian works pretty well.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think we'll keep him along. Maybe bring some friends along next time we read a dialogue piece. But yeah, so I'll work with this, try to perfect this over the next few weeks, find a way to make this time efficient. And I appreciate Fapples Apples for showing up. I'm not sure who you are. I appreciate you showing up and contributing. And tell your friends, okay? This will be on the Twitch channel. Share this around. I think some people might like this. We might not be able to get through all of them, but we'll get through more together than maybe what you would do by yourself. And if that's the ultimate best we can do, then the best we can do is good enough. So cool. Well, this has been SCP-CRNP. Y'all take it easy. Be sure to catch the Saturday show at 11 Central Time, scheduled on the Twitch. That's our call-in show. You can call in, share your thoughts, whatever. That goes on for about an hour. We got all members of different containment fiction communities hanging out there, so check it out. But I appreciate you showing up and appreciate you watching this ex post facto, and we'll do it again. Peace.